A note in the deceased's pocket, a single secret, and a will from beyond the grave. This is a story that fundamentally shook the beliefs of a mortician like me, someone who thought the dead were silent. A night that taught me that secrets buried with a body sometimes find a way to speak one last time. My name is Ethan. I've been in this business for over 20 years. I've seen everything related to death. I know every detail. The coldness of the bodies, their silence, those empty stares. Over time, you get used to it. And at some point, you gain that clinical composure required for the profession. Everything has an explanation. Everything is based on scientific data. At least, that's what I thought. The funeral home for me was the last bastion of science, the place where life ended and only the body remained. But some nights, that fortress trembles, and on that night, my fortress was utterly demolished. This is Evergreen Funeral Home. It's an old building with high ceilings and intricate woodwork in one of the city's established neighborhoods. There are visitation rooms at the front, and in the back, the preparation room, and a small storage area where I spend most of my time. I usually work nights. Fewer distractions, fewer visitors. Just me, my instruments, and the low hum of the embalming machine. That night was no different. It was a Tuesday night, a thin drizzle outside. There was a lot of work to do. It was a little past midnight. I was preparing the last case. His name was Mr. Harrison. In his early 70s, he had passed away peacefully in his sleep. He had no close relatives, only a distant nephew handling the funeral arrangements. There was no obvious trauma to his body, just the calm stillness that comes with old age and peace. As I worked, my small radio played soft jazz music. That's my routine. The building was completely silent, save for the hum of the machine and the sound of my movements. I was focused. Everything was as it should be. Mr. Harrison lay on the preparation table, a faint, serene smile on his face, his wrinkles filled with a quiet dignity. The preparation procedures were progressing as usual. I had already made the arterial incisions and begun injecting the preservative fluids. This is a series of meticulous movements that become automatic over time. Every detail is important because this body will be the last image in the minds of their loved ones. Mr. Harrison's hands were folded over his chest, the lines on his face whispering of a lifetime lived. Then, before dressing him in his burial clothes, as I always do, I checked his pockets. This is standard protocol to prevent any personal belongings from being lost during the funeral ceremony. I reached into the inner pocket of his jacket. Normally, it would be a wallet, keys, sometimes a crumpled handkerchief. But in Mr. Harrison's pocket, there was a small, folded piece of paper. It was quite thin and worn, as if it had been there for a long time. This was unusual. Usually personal belongings were removed by the funeral home staff from the outset and handed over to the family. This note must have been somehow overlooked. I pulled the note from his pocket. It was slightly yellowed, old paper. On it were just a few words, handwritten and quite legible. I opened it with a mix of curiosity and a growing sense of unease. It read, "Take me to that old park on Maple Street. Under the bench, the key is there, the secret is there. Tell no one." I froze. My blood ran cold. A tiny piece of paper, this message from an old man's pocket, had released an unexpected tension into the cold, sterile room of the morgue. This was impossible. The dead don't speak. The dead don't leave messages. And I, a man who had spent his life in this silence, was now faced with an instruction from a dead man. I reread the note. That old park on Maple Street, under the bench. The key is there. The secret is there. Tell no one. Each word was like a blow to my logic, to my job, to all my beliefs. I told myself this is just an illusion. Perhaps it's a moment of senility, a meaningless note he wrote in his last days. But my heart was pounding. Inside me, a primal curiosity, rejected by logic, was rising. And then there was that phrase in the note, "Tell no one." This changed everything. This wasn't just a delusion. It was a conscious request. I folded the note and put it in my own pocket. What was I going to do? Call the police? What would I say? I found a body with a mysterious note in his pocket, and this note directs me to a park no one knows about. They'd think I was crazy. Tell his family? I didn't want to add to their grief. And the warning in the note, tell no one. That night, I completed Mr. Harrison's preparations. I dressed him in his suit, adjusted his face one last time. He looked peaceful, but behind his closed eyes, I felt as if I could see the shadow of the secret the note implied. I placed his body in the cold storage, then locked it. I didn't go back that night. The next morning, my colleague Sarah, a seasoned nurse at the funeral home, was checking Mr. Harrison's documents. No family members have requested a viewing. It looks like he'll go to the pauper's grave, she said with a sigh. What a shame. I just nodded, the weight of the note still heavy in my pocket. It felt as if that small piece of paper was making the entire room heavy. That day, as the deadline for Mr. Harrison's funeral approached, I felt a growing unease inside me. For the first time in my professional life, I felt a responsibility towards a funeral. The phrase, "tell no one" in the note, more than a simple request, felt like an oath. It was a dead man's last wish. And I, for all my practicality and logic, knew I couldn't ignore it. That afternoon, after my shift, I left work without telling anyone. I got in my car and drove straight to that old park on Maple Street. The park was in one of the town's oldest residential areas, a quiet place, mostly used by the elderly and children. Darkness had begun to fall. The trees were bare, the benches empty. Dry leaves rustled on the ground with the wind. As I entered the park, I immediately found the bench Mr. Harrison's note mentioned. It was quite old, rusted, a wooden bench worn by time. No one was around. I was alone. My heart was pounding, adrenaline coursing through my veins. This wasn't a mystery a gravedigger or a nurse might encounter. This was a mortician embarking on a deceased's final quest. I followed the instruction in the note. Under the bench. I knelt down. Beneath the bench, nestled between the rusty iron legs, was a small metal box. It was covered in dirt, almost invisible, as if intentionally hidden there. It wasn't easy to get it out. It was practically fused with the earth. When I finally extracted the box, it left a heavy feeling in my palm. It was rusty, bearing the marks of years and earth. There were no markings on it. The note said, "The key is there." I examined the box carefully. There was no visible lock mechanism or keyhole. For a moment, I felt disappointed. Maybe I was wrong. Perhaps this was just an old man's last delusion. But the certainty in the note, that unwavering conviction, urged me not to give up. I started looking more closely. I noticed a thin, rusty metal strip along the edge of the box. It was very subtle, barely visible. I pressed it with my finger. The strip slid in slightly, and a small lid opened. Inside, there was a small, old, bronze key. The key's surface was worn, but distinct. I took the key. The note also said, "The secret is there. This couldn't be just a key." What did this key unlock? This key was the only way to solve the mystery of Mr. Harrison's note. By the time I returned home, night had fallen. Before going to bed, I examined the key. It looked antique, with no symbols or markings on it. Simple, yet elegant craftsmanship. I fell asleep wondering what this key unlocked. Early the next morning, before going to work, I began researching Mr. Harrison's past again. He had lived such a solitary life that very little information was available about him. The internet, the town's old archives, property records. I was searching for clues to Mr. Harrison's life. The phrase, "The secret is there," in the note, kept replaying in my mind. This turned into a research marathon that lasted weeks. Without disrupting my duties at the funeral home, I pursued Mr. Harrison's trail in every free moment. Old newspaper clippings, sleepy conversations with town residents, old property deeds. I was trying to piece together the fragments. And finally, I found a small but crucial clue. A place where Mr. Harrison had worked in his youth. An old, now abandoned watchmaker's shop in town. It was called the Key of Time. This was eerily similar to Arthur Jenkins's story, with the key and the symbols on the clock. But this was an entirely different situation. I immediately went to the street where the shop was located. It was an old, rusty shop with decaying wooden boards. Even the sign above it, the Key of Time, was rusted. The door was locked, but seeing how old the lock was, I hoped the key would work. I inserted the key into the keyhole. There was a click, and the lock opened. I pushed the door. Inside was a dark, dusty void. The air was heavy, smelled of mold. Old, dusty shelves lined the walls, filled with hundreds, thousands of clocks. All stopped, crushed under the weight of time. Broken glass fragments and rusty tools lay on the floor. This was a place where a man, once full of life, had stopped time. I turned on my flashlight. As I swept the light around, I noticed a workbench at the back of the shop. On it were tools, small clock parts, and dusty books. And right in the middle of the workbench, a small, closed wooden box. There were no markings on it. I walked towards the box, my heart pounding. Was this the secret? I opened it with the key. The box contained a small, handwritten journal. The journal was old, its pages yellowed, its ink faded. This was Mr. Harrison's diary. I opened the journal. On the first page it read, "My life's greatest secret is hidden in these pages. No one must know. But if I die, and one day someone finds this note, then they must know. I know I will not be forgiven for what I did, but they must find him, and they must know the truth." My blood ran cold as I read the entry. This was more of a confession than a will. Mr. Harrison described the secret in the note as an old murder. In his youth, he had accidentally killed a man in the wooded area outside of town. A hunting accident, he wrote, but he never dared to tell anyone. The victim's body was buried in the forest, under a specific tree. The note detailed its location. He had carried this secret for years, living with the guilt. Even on his deathbed, his soul could not find peace. His last wish was for the victim to be found and his family notified. This was his final way of confessing his crime and doing the right thing before he died. My radio was with me, but again, what was I going to do? This wasn't a mortician's job. This was a police matter. But the phrase, "tell no one from the note," was still in my mind. Mr. Harrison had died alone, without family. He hadn't expected anyone to question him. And now, in my hands, was a 50-year-old secret. I took the journal and left the shop, locking the door behind me. I went straight to the town's police station. The police chief was my old friend, Chief Miller. We had known each other since childhood. When I walked in, Chief Miller was surprised. "Ethan, what are you doing here at this hour?" he asked. I placed the journal on his desk. "Chief," I said, my voice trembling, "you have to read this, and you have to believe me." Chief Miller read the journal. His face slowly drained of color. He looked at me in disbelief. This is impossible. 50 years ago, no one remembers an incident like this." "The note has details," I said. "The location, the date, even the victim's name." The journal indeed contained the victim's name. Daniel, a man who had vanished from town, leaving no trace. No one ever spoke of him. That night, Chief Miller and I followed the instructions in Mr. Harrison's journal. Deep in the forest, we found the tree specified in the note, and there it was. When we dug, we found Daniel's remains, exactly 50 years later. Beside him, a rusted wristwatch and a key, just as Mr. Harrison had described. The incident caused a huge stir in town. Mr. Harrison's will, a confession that surfaced after his death. The police confirmed that Mr. Harrison had lived with guilt and that I had fulfilled his last wish. The victim's family, after so many years, finally found closure. When I returned to the funeral home, preparations were made to take Mr. Harrison's body to the morgue. When I saw him for the last time, there was a faint smile on his face. His eyes were closed. He was sleeping peacefully. The weight of the note was still in my pocket, but now it was filled with peace. He had revealed his secret, freeing his soul. From that day on, death changed for me. It was no longer just an end, but sometimes a beginning. I learned that some secrets aren't buried in the earth. They just wait for the right time. And my job as a mortician wasn't just to prepare bodies, but sometimes to help souls one last time, to deliver their final messages to the world. This gave my profession a new meaning, a new responsibility. I still keep that note from Mr. Harrison's pocket as a reminder of the mysteries that lie beyond death, of the wills waiting to be revealed. And it silently whispers that every body tells a story. You just have to learn to listen. Hello, friends. Thank you all for joining me on this chilling journey. Your support means everything to me, and I absolutely love reading your reactions and personal experiences in the comments section. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat or sent shivers down your spine, please make sure to hit that like button and consider subscribing for more haunting tales. Have you ever experienced anything similar to this? Or perhaps you have your own unexplainable story to share? I'd genuinely love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Each of your stories adds another fascinating layer to our growing community of horror enthusiasts. And if you think someone else might enjoy a good scare, don't forget to share this video with them. Stay tuned for more spine-chilling stories. And remember, sometimes the scariest tales are the ones that could happen to any of us. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video if you dare.